London, 1857. The afternoon light filtered through the grand windows of Harrington House, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Inside, the Duke of Thornfield sat alone in his study, a letter clutched in his hand, its contents devastating. Lord Ian Xavier, the 9th Duke of Thornfield, stared at the words until they blurred before his eyes. Your betrothal to Lady Elizabeth Worthington shall proceed as planned. The wedding date has been set for June the 15th. Her dowry will save our estates. I trust you understand your duty to the dukedom. His father's final command from beyond the grave, delivered by family solicitors on the anniversary of the old duke's death, as stipulated in his will. Ian crumpled the letter in his fist. At 32, he had spent his entire life fulfilling duties, to family, to title, to the 200 tenants who depended on his stewardship. The crushing debt his father had accumulated through years of gambling and poor investments now fell to him. The Thornfield name must be preserved at all costs. Love is a luxury afforded only to those without responsibility, his father had often reminded him. Remember always, duty before desire. Ian had believed it, lived by it, until last autumn when everything changed. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called, straightening his posture and schooling his features into the mask of ducal authority he had perfected. His butler, Wilkins, stepped in with practiced formality. Your Grace, a Miss Garrett to see you. She claims it is regarding the Museum Restoration Committee. Ian's heart faltered. Show her to the blue drawing room. I shall be there momentarily. After Wilkins departed, Ian moved to the mirror, adjusting his cravat and smoothing his dark hair. The face that stared back at him appeared composed, but his eyes betrayed him. They held the torment of a man trapped between obligation and the only happiness he had ever known. He descended the grand staircase, each step heavy with the weight of his title. The blue drawing-room door stood open, and there she was, Catherine Garrett, standing by the window, the afternoon light illuminating her profile. Not conventionally beautiful by society's standards, perhaps, but to him, she outshone every debutante who had ever been paraded before him. She turned at his footsteps, her intelligent green eyes meeting his. Your Grace, she said with a small curtsy. Miss Garrett. His voice remained formal despite the rapid beating of his heart. This is an unexpected pleasure. I apologize for calling without proper notice. She clutched a portfolio of papers. The committee requires your approval on these revised architectural plans for the Natural History Wing. The original estimates were insufficient. Of course, he gestured to the seating area. Please, As she spread the drawings across the table, Ian watched her hands, slender, capable hands that belonged to a woman who had made her own way in the world. Catherine Garrett, daughter of a respected but impoverished scholar, now London's most sought-after historical consultant for museum collections and architectural preservation. The limestone needed for the facade will cost significantly more than initially projected, she explained, her focus on the papers before them. Approve whatever is necessary, he replied, caring nothing for limestone or facades, only for the gentle curve of her neck as she bent over the plans. She glanced up, surprised. Without even reviewing the figures, that would be irresponsible, Your Grace. I trust your judgment, Miss Garrett. A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, crossed her features. As chairman of the committee, your careful consideration is expected. The board would question such casual approval. How quickly she established distance between them. Ian's jaw tightened. Very well. He forced himself to examine the documents while acutely aware of her scent, lavender and ink, and the soft sound of her breathing. The modifications you suggested last month have been incorporated, she said, pointing to the revised drawing. The natural light will now reach the fossil displays without risk of damage. Your solution is elegant, he replied, remembering their animated discussion about that very problem during the autumn planning sessions, before everything had changed between them. Thank you, her voice softened slightly, and for a moment the formal facade slipped. I remembered how you spoke of visiting the Oxford Museum as a boy, how the light streaming through the glass ceiling made the dinosaur bones appear almost alive. That she had recalled such a personal detail, shared during one of their long walks through the museum grounds, pierced him. Those autumn days when he had volunteered to personally oversee the restoration, not out of duty, but to spend hours in her company, learning how her brilliant mind worked, discovering her passion for preservation and history. "I did not think you would remember such trivial conversation," he said quietly. Her eyes met his. "I remember everything, Your Grace." The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken words. "I heard news of your betrothal," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral as she gathered her papers. "Lady Elizabeth Worthington is much admired. May I offer my congratulations?" The formal words cut deeper than any accusation might have. "It is not yet officially announced. But it is decided, not a question. Some matters are beyond even a duke's control, Miss Garrett." Her smile was brittle. "I find that difficult to believe. Is there anything else you require regarding the museum?" "Catherine," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, propriety momentarily forgotten. She stiffened. "I believe we agreed that such familiarity was a mistake, Your Grace. One best forgotten by both parties." Before he could respond, the drawing-room door opened and Wilkins announced, "Lady Elizabeth Worthington and her mother, the Countess of Shirebrook, Your Grace." Ian watched as Catherine quickly composed herself, tucking away any trace of emotion as two elegantly dressed women entered the room. "Ian, darling," Lady Elizabeth floated toward him, a vision in pale blue silk, her blonde curls arranged perfectly beneath her fashionable bonnet. "We were passing and simply had to call. Oh, I did not realize you had a visitor. Lady Elizabeth, Lady Shirebrook, may I present Miss Catherine Garrett? She consults on the museum restoration project I chair." Lady Elizabeth's eyes swept over Catherine's simple grey dress and practical bonnet. "How fascinating, a working woman. Mother and I were just discussing the charity committee's efforts to improve conditions for such unfortunate females." Catherine's smile remained polite, though Ian detected the slight tightening around her eyes. "How commendable of you, Lady Elizabeth, though I assure you my work brings me great satisfaction. Miss Garrett is the foremost expert on historical preservation in London," Ian said firmly. "The British Museum considers her counsel invaluable." The Countess raised her lorgnette to examine Catherine more closely. "Garrett, not related to Professor William Garrett, the antiquarian who died in such reduced circumstances?" "My father, yes," Catherine answered steadily. "I thought so. Such a tragedy. Brilliant man, but entirely impractical with finances. Left his family quite destitute, as I recall." The Countess's tone managed to convey both sympathy and condescension. Ian observed the slight flush on Catherine's cheeks, the way her chin lifted. Pride, it was one of the qualities he most admired in her. "My father left a legacy of knowledge that continues to enrich the nation's cultural institutions," Catherine replied. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another appointment. Your Grace, if you could review these plans by next week, the committee would be most appreciative." She gathered her portfolio with steady hands, executed a perfect curtsy to the ladies, and departed with her dignity intact. Ian watched her go, knowing he should feel relief at the timely interruption, but experiencing only a profound sense of loss. When he turned back to his guests, he found Lady Elizabeth studying his face with unexpected shrewdness. "She seems quite competent," Lady Elizabeth remarked. "You must value her work highly." "The restoration project benefits greatly from her expertise," he replied neutrally. "Indeed," Lady Elizabeth shared a glance with her mother. "Perhaps we might discuss the wedding preparations over tea. Mother has been corresponding with the florist." As Ian escorted the ladies to the drawing room, duty weighed on him like a physical burden. Behind them, Wilkins closed the door to the blue drawing room, sealing away the lingering scent of lavender and the memory of green eyes filled with carefully concealed hurt. 3 days later, Catherine stood in the dim light of the museum's eastern wing, examining a damaged Roman mosaic. The silence of the closed gallery enveloped her, a blessing after a morning of directing workmen and arguing with suppliers. Here, among these fragments of the past, she found a measure of peace. The gladiator's face is remarkably preserved. She startled at the deep voice behind her, then stiffened as she recognized it. "Your Grace, I did not expect you today." Ian moved to stand beside her, gazing down at the ancient stones. "I reviewed your proposals. All are approved." You could have sent a messenger. I could have, he agreed, his eyes still on the mosaic. Just as you could have sent your assistant with the plans rather than delivering them personally. Catherine turned to face him fully. That would have been inappropriate. I am responsible for this project. And I for my duties. His gaze finally met hers. The announcement will appear in tomorrow's papers. She nodded once sharply. I wish you every happiness. Do you? His voice was low, almost angry. Or are you merely saying what propriety demands? What would you have me say instead? She challenged. That I spend my nights unable to sleep, thinking of autumn afternoons when a duke forgot his station and walked with a scholar's daughter through fallen leaves, discussing architecture and history and… She stopped herself, horror at her own frankness washing over her. And dreams, he finished softly. We spoke of dreams, Catherine. Dreams are luxuries for people like me, Your Grace. She turned back to the mosaic, blinking rapidly. Reality is what matters. You will marry Lady Elizabeth, secure your estates, and produce the required heir. I will continue my work. Life will proceed as it should. As it should, he repeated hollowly. Tell me, do you truly believe that? My beliefs are irrelevant, as are my feelings, as are yours. She gestured to the mosaic. This gladiator fought because he had no choice. We all have our arenas. Some arenas allow for choice, Ian argued. We could. No, she cut him off sharply. There is no we, Your Grace. There never truly was. One kiss beneath an October moon would suggest otherwise, he said quietly. The memory of that night sliced through her defenses. The museum benefit, their escape to the garden, the way moonlight silvered his dark hair as he'd finally, after weeks of tension, lowered his mouth to hers. One perfect moment before reality intruded. A moment of madness, she replied, her voice unsteady. One I have paid for daily in regret. The hurt that flashed across his face nearly undid her resolve. Regret, he echoed. Is that truly what you feel when you remember it? What I feel doesn't matter, she insisted. You are a duke. I am the daughter of a disgraced scholar who died in debt. Even if you weren't betrothed, nothing could ever come of whatever this was between us. You underestimate my resolve. And you overestimate your freedom. Catherine gathered her skirts. Good day, Your Grace. The workmen will return tomorrow. I suggest you avoid the gallery until the restoration is complete. She walked away, her back straight, feeling his gaze follow her until she turned the corner. Only then did she allow herself to lean against the wall, one hand pressed to her mouth to stifle the sound of her breaking heart. The announcement appeared as promised in the morning papers. Catherine read it over breakfast in her modest flat above the bookshop in Bloomsbury, the tea growing cold beside her. The Duke of Thornfield to wed Lady Elizabeth Worthington, the headline proclaimed. Below it, details of the June wedding, mentions of Lady Elizabeth's lineage, and speculation about the grand celebration to come. Catherine set the paper aside, squared her shoulders, and prepared for her day. Work had been her salvation after her father's death had left the family destitute. It would be her salvation now. Her younger sister, Harriet, entered the small parlor, already dressed for her position as a music teacher at a nearby ladies' academy. You've seen it then? She asked gently. It changes nothing, Catherine replied, reaching for her bonnet. The museum committee meets at 10. Harriet placed a hand on her arm. You don't have to pretend with me, Cassie. I saw your face that night when you returned from the benefit. I know. Catherine's careful composure wavered. It was impossible from the start, a foolish dream. Love is never foolish, Harriet said softly. It is when it can lead nowhere. Catherine pinned her bonnet with determined motions. And now I must focus on securing the Caldwell Commission. The fee would allow us to move Mother to better lodgings, where her health might improve. Always the practical one, Harriet sighed, but I worry about you. Catherine managed a small smile. I survived Father's disgrace and death. I will survive this. But as she walked to the museum through London's crowded streets, Catherine wondered if survival was enough. For a brief season in the Duke of Thornfield's company, she had felt truly alive, her mind engaged, her heart awakened. Now she moved through grey days like one of the marble statues she helped preserve, Cold, intact, but lifeless. The weeks that followed tested her endurance. Society papers breathlessly reported each detail of the upcoming Thornfield-Worthington nuptials. Catherine threw herself into her work, accepting additional commissions that left her exhausted but gave her dreamless sleep. She avoided the museum when she knew the Duke would be present, sending her assistant in her place. The architectural plans proceeded. The Roman gallery neared completion. Life continued, relentless and empty. Then came the invitation. A reception at Thornfield House to celebrate the completion of the East Wing restoration, read the elegant card delivered to her door. The Duke of Thornfield requests the honor of your attendance as chief consultant on this historic achievement. You must decline, her mother insisted when Catherine showed her the invitation. It would be too painful. If I decline, it will appear unprofessional, Catherine argued. This project will lead to others. We need the connections. Your heart needs protection, her mother countered, but Catherine knew her decision was made. One final evening in his presence, and then she would close that chapter forever, perhaps seeing him in his proper place, beside his beautiful, wealthy fiancée, would finally cure her of this persistent ache. The night of the reception arrived, bringing unseasonable rain that drummed against the windows of Thornfield House. Catherine entered the grand foyer, grateful that her plain but well-made navy gown wouldn't show water spots. Around her, London's elite mingled in silks and jewels, admiring the newly restored rooms that would open to the public the following week. Miss Garrett, the museum director approached, beaming. The crown jewel of our restoration efforts. Come, several patrons wish to hear about your work on the mosaics. Catherine allowed herself to be led through the crowd, explaining technical details and answering questions about preservation methods. If her eyes occasionally searched for a tall figure with broad shoulders and dark hair, she would not admit it even to herself. An hour passed before she finally glimpsed him, standing near the entrance to the Roman gallery, deep in conversation with an elderly gentleman. As though sensing her gaze, Ian looked up, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room. For a moment, neither moved. Then he excused himself and began making his way toward her. Catherine's heart thundered in her chest. She should move, find another conversation to join, avoid this approaching collision, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. Miss Garrett, he stopped before her, formal and distant. The gallery is magnificent. Your vision has been realized beyond all expectations. Thank you, Your Grace. The committee's support was instrumental. Would you accompany me to view the completed mosaic? Several guests have inquired about its history. A proper request that offered no grounds for refusal. Catherine nodded, and he guided her toward the gallery, careful not to touch her even as they navigated the crowded room. The Roman gallery was quieter, with only a few guests examining the displays. The restored mosaic held pride of place, dramatically lit to showcase the vivid colors revived under Catherine's direction. Where is Lady Elizabeth this evening? Catherine asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. At her family's country estate, Ian replied. Final preparations for the wedding. It's less than a month away now, is it not? 3 weeks, his voice was flat. They stood side by side, looking at the ancient stones that had been carefully pieced back together. The gladiator's face, Ian noted. You've restored his expression, he looks. Resigned, Catherine finished. Yet determined. A man facing his fate. Yes, she turned slightly toward him. Your Grace, Ian, Lady Elizabeth's voice rang through the gallery. There you are, darling. Both Catherine and Ian turned in surprise as the blonde vision in pink silk hurried toward them. Followed by her mother and a distinguished-looking gentleman Catherine didn't recognize. Elizabeth, Ian's shock was evident. I thought you were in Derbyshire. We returned early, such dreadful weather for traveling. She took his arm possessively, then noticed Catherine. Miss Garrett, isn't it? The museum lady. Lady Elizabeth, Catherine curtsied. I was just explaining the restoration process to His Grace. How dedicated you are to your little projects. Lady Elizabeth's smile didn't reach her eyes. But I must steal him away. Lord Harrington has the most fascinating investment opportunity to discuss. Before Catherine could respond, Lady Elizabeth had swept Ian toward the waiting gentleman. The Duchess-to-be glanced back once, her message clear: know your place. Catherine remained by the mosaic, the ache in her chest almost unbearable. This was for the best, she reminded herself. This was reality. This was Miss Garrett. She turned to find the Countess of Shirebrook watching her with shrewd eyes. Lady Shirebrook. Catherine curtsied again, wondering what fresh humiliation awaited. You care for him, the Countess stated bluntly. Catherine froze. I beg your pardon. And he for you. It's painfully obvious to anyone with eyes, the older woman sighed. Though I suppose that excludes my daughter. Your ladyship, I assure you. Save your assurances. The Countess waved a dismissive hand. I've lived long enough to recognize the signs. A pity. The heart rarely chooses wisely in these matters. Catherine remained silent, mortified that her feelings were apparently so transparent. He will do his duty, the Countess continued. The Thornfield estates need my daughter's dowry, and she desires a dukedom, a practical arrangement. As most aristocratic marriages are, Catherine managed. Indeed, the Countess studied her. You are Professor Garrett's eldest, are you not? I knew him, you know. Brilliant mind, terrible with money. My father's financial difficulties are well known, Catherine said stiffly, as is the scandal that preceded them. The Countess raised one eyebrow. Though perhaps not to the current generation. Catherine's blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean. No, how interesting. The Countess's smile was calculating. Ask your mother about the summer of 1835. About a certain manuscript and the previous Duke of Thornfield. Before Catherine could respond, the Countess glided away, leaving her with a growing sense of dread. What connection could there possibly be between her father and Ian's father? And why mention it now? The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. Catherine made her excuses and departed early, her mind racing with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Her mother was still awake when Catherine returned to their modest home, sitting by the fire with her knitting. You're back early, Margaret Garrett observed. Was it very difficult? Mother, Catherine said slowly, removing her gloves. What happened in the summer of 1835, between father and the previous Duke of Thornfield? The knitting needles stilled, her mother's face paled. Who told you to ask about that? The Countess of Shirebrook. She implied there was some scandal. Margaret Garrett set aside her work with trembling hands. I had hoped that was buried with your father. What was? Catherine pressed, sitting across from her mother. After a long pause, Margaret began. Your father discovered a manuscript, Saxon in origin, that contained information contradicting the Thornfield family's claim to their lands. The 8th Duke paid him to suppress it, to declare it a forgery. And did he? Catherine whispered, already knowing the answer. No, your father published his findings instead. The manuscript proved that the 1st Duke of Thornfield had falsified documents during the Restoration period. Margaret twisted her wedding ring. The 8th Duke was furious. He used his influence to discredit your father, to have him removed from the university. No institution would hire him afterward. So our family's financial ruin was orchestrated by the Thornfield Duke. Yes, Margaret's eyes were sad. Your father believed truth mattered more than consequences. I sometimes wonder if he would have chosen differently had he known how we would suffer. Catherine sat back, stunned. Does the current Duke know? I cannot say. It was all handled very quietly, with much of society believing your father's disgrace was solely due to his own financial mismanagement. The old Duke was careful to protect the family name. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. The previous Duke of Thornfield had destroyed her father. Now his son was bound to marry into wealth to save the dukedom that had been built on a lie. I see, Catherine said finally. Thank you for telling me the truth. She retired to her room, but sleep eluded her. By morning, she had made her decision. The past could not be changed, but she would not allow it to claim more victims. It was time to release Ian from the burden of her feelings and truly let him go. Catherine wrote a letter resigning from the museum committee, citing increased private commissions. She recommended her assistant to complete any remaining work. The letter to Ian was briefer still. a formal note thanking him for the opportunity to work on the restoration and wishing him happiness in his marriage. Both were delivered by messenger. Within hours, a response arrived from the museum director expressing regret at her departure but accepting her recommendation. From Thornfield House there was only silence. Days passed. Catherine immersed herself in a new project cataloguing artifacts for a private collector. She did not read the society pages. She did not walk past the museum. She existed, focused only on work and family. 1 week before the Thornfield-Worthington wedding, as Catherine was returning from her mother's physician with a new prescription, a carriage bearing the Thornfield crest stopped beside her on the rain-soaked street. "Miss Garrett," Ian's voice came from within the carriage. "A moment of your time, please." Heart-pounding, she approached the window. "Your Grace. Will you join me? I would speak with you privately." Every instinct warned against it, but the intensity in his eyes compelled her. She allowed the footman to help her into the carriage, settling as far from Ian as the space permitted. "Drive on," he instructed the coachman, then closed the privacy screen. They sat in silence as the carriage began moving through London's streets. "You resigned," he said finally. "It seemed best." "Without discussing it with me." "The decision was mine to make," she replied. "As committee chairman, you received proper notification." "Damn the committee," Ian said, his composure cracking. "You vanished. No word, no explanation." "I provided professional courtesy. Anything more would have been," she hesitated. "Would have been what, Catherine?" "Inappropriate," she finished firmly. "Your wedding is next week." He looked away, his jaw tight. "Yes." "Then there is nothing more to discuss." "Isn't there?" He turned back to her, his eyes stormy. "The Countess of Shirebrook approached me after the reception. She mentioned your father." Catherine's stomach clenched. "What did she tell you?" "That our fathers had a significant dispute, that your family suffered because of mine." He leaned forward. "Is this why you've always kept your distance? Why you pulled away after we—" "No," she interrupted. "I didn't know until the night of the reception. My mother confirmed it afterward." Ian's expression darkened. What exactly happened? Catherine related what her mother had told her, watching as anger and then horror crossed his face. "I had no idea," he said when she finished. "My father never spoke of it." "Why would he? It reflects poorly on your family's claim to its position." "If what you say is true—" "It is true," she said firmly. "My father was many things, but never a liar." Ian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. "This changes everything." "It changes nothing," Catherine corrected. "What's done is done. Your engagement proceeds. My work continues." "How can you be so calm?" he demanded. "My family destroyed yours, yet you worked for the museum restoration, helped preserve the Thornfield legacy." "I did my job," she said simply. "My father's righteousness cost us dearly. I learned to be practical instead." "Practical," he repeated, studying her face. "Is that why you walked away after that night in October? Practicality?" The question struck at her heart. "I walked away because I had to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you'll receive." She glanced out the window. "We're circling the same streets. Please have your coachman return me to where you found me." "Not until you tell me the truth," Ian insisted. "One truth, Catherine. Did you feel nothing when I kissed you?" Her resolve crumbled. "I felt everything," she whispered. "Everything I shouldn't have felt for a duke, everything I couldn't allow myself to feel for the son of the man who ruined my father." She met his gaze directly. "Everything I still feel, God help me." The confession hung between them. Ian moved to the seat beside her, taking her gloved hands in his. "Come away with me," he said urgently. "Now, today. We could go to Scotland, be married before anyone realizes." "And destroy everything you've worked for," she cut in. "Abandon your tenants to financial ruin, subject your name to scandal. Watch your mother and sisters face society's condemnation." She shook her head. "I will not be the cause of your downfall." "Catherine." "No, Ian," she pulled her hands from his. "Your father taught you that duty comes before desire. Mine taught me that principles have consequences. We are both our father's children, she rapped on the privacy screen. Driver, stop here, please. The carriage slowed. Catherine reached for the door handle, but Ian caught her wrist. This isn't finished, he said, his voice low and intense. I won't lose you to the sins of our fathers. You never had me to lose, she lied, and stepped out into the rain. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved the match between the Duke of Thornfield and Lady Elizabeth Worthington. Catherine spent the morning helping her mother settle into the new rooms they had rented with the advance from the Caldwell Commission, modest but more comfortable than their previous lodgings. You're very quiet today, her mother observed as Catherine arranged flowers on the windowsill. Just tired, Catherine replied. The move was more taxing than expected. The wedding is today, isn't it? Margaret Garrett's voice was gentle. It's all right to be sad, my dear. Catherine's hands stilled on the vase. It was never a possibility, Mother. I've accepted that. Have you? Her mother sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I should have raised you differently, encouraged dreams instead of practicality. Then we might all have starved, Catherine said with a small smile. You did what was necessary after Father died. As you've always done. Margaret reached for her daughter's hand. But necessary isn't always right, Catherine. Your father taught me that. Before Catherine could respond, there was a commotion downstairs, voices raised, footsteps on the stairs. Catherine moved to the door just as Harriet burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. Cassie, you won't believe it, it's all over London. What is? Catherine asked, alarmed by her sister's state. The Thornfield wedding, it's been called off. The Duke left Lady Elizabeth at the altar. Catherine swayed, gripping the doorframe for support. That's impossible. It's true, Mrs. Cooper's son works at St. George's. He said the Duke arrived, stood at the altar until Lady Elizabeth entered on her father's arm, then announced to the entire congregation that he could not proceed with a marriage based on falsehood. Harriet's words tumbled out in excitement. Then he walked out, leaving everyone in shock. Dear God, Margaret whispered, the scandal will be enormous. That's not all, Harriet continued. He apparently told Lady Elizabeth privately that he was in love with someone else, someone of integrity and true worth. Catherine's heart thundered in her chest. When did this happen? Not an hour ago. The gossip is spreading like wildfire. They say Lady Elizabeth fainted dead away, and her mother is threatening to sue for breach of promise. A sharp knock at the street door interrupted Harriet's account. All three women froze. I'll see who it is, Harriet volunteered, darting back downstairs. Catherine stood motionless, her mind racing. He couldn't have, not for her, the consequences would be catastrophic. Harriet's footsteps returned, slower this time. She appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. It's him, she whispered. The Duke of Thornfield. He's asking for you, Cathy. Margaret Garrett rose from her chair. Show his grace to the parlour, Harriet. Catherine will be down momentarily. When Harriet left, Margaret turned to her daughter. Whatever you decide, remember this. Your father believed some principles are worth any price. Perhaps the Duke has learned the same lesson. Catherine descended the stairs on unsteady legs, pausing outside the small parlour door to gather her composure. She smoothed her simple morning dress, wished fleetingly that she wore something finer, then dismissed the thought as vanity. She opened the door. Ian stood by the window, still in his wedding clothes, formal black tailcoat, silver waistcoat, perfectly tied cravat. He turned at her entrance, and the naked emotion on his face stole her breath. Catherine, what have you done? She whispered. He crossed to her in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. What I should have done months ago. You left her at the altar. The scandal will be considerable, he acknowledged. I've already dispatched letters to the newspapers, with a statement taking full responsibility. Your family. My mother understands. My sisters think I've finally shown some backbone. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. The only person whose opinion truly matters to me is standing right here. Catherine pulled her hands free, moving back a step. This is madness, Ian. You've thrown away everything, your reputation, your chance to save the estates. I've thrown away a lie, he interrupted. After our conversation, I had the family solicitors investigate the manuscript your father discovered. They confirmed its authenticity. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its careful styling. The first Duke did falsify documents. Our family's claim to the title has been built on deception for generations. I couldn't enter another falsehood by marrying Elizabeth when my heart belongs elsewhere. The consequences will be managed, he said firmly. I've already begun liquidating assets to repay Elizabeth's dowry and address the estate debts. We won't be destitute, though certainly less grand than before. Society will shun you, Catherine protested. Let them. I've lived my entire life a prisoner to duty and others' expectations. He stepped closer again. Do you know what I realized standing at that altar? My father was wrong. Duty without love is empty. It creates only more lies, more pain. Aidan. I love you, Catherine Garrett. The words fell into the space between them, simple and profound. I have since that first autumn day when you challenged every assumption I made about the museum restoration. I love your mind, your principles, your steadfast heart. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. We come from different worlds. Worlds built on falsehoods, he countered. I'd rather build something true with you. I have nothing to offer a duke, she whispered. I'm not asking you to love a duke, Ian replied, reaching for her hands again. I'm asking you to love a man, one who has finally found the courage to choose his own path. Catherine looked up into his face, earnest, vulnerable, more open than she had ever seen it. What if I already do, she admitted softly. What if I have since October, since that night under the moon when you kissed me, and I first understood what it meant to want something I couldn't have? Joy transformed his features. Then have me now, he said, sinking to one knee before her. Catherine Garrett, will you marry me? Not for duty or restoration or propriety, but simply for love. Her heart overflowed. Yes, she whispered, then more strongly. Yes, sir. He rose and pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that erased doubt, erased the past, erased everything but the truth between them. When they finally parted, breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. There will be difficulties ahead, he warned. Society has a long memory for scandal. So do scholars, she replied with a small smile. We'll face it together. Together, he agreed and kissed her again. In the doorway, unseen by the couple, Margaret and Harriet Garrett exchanged glances, one tearful, one delighted. Quietly, they withdrew, leaving love to claim what duty and the past had nearly destroyed. The scandal rocked London society, as expected. The gossip papers feasted on the story of the Duke who abandoned an heiress for a scholar's daughter. Lady Elizabeth eventually married a viscount with gambling debts, but impeccable lineage. The Countess of Shirebrook never forgave the slight to her daughter, though she privately acknowledged the match had been doomed from the start. Ian and Catherine were married by special license 2 weeks later in a quiet ceremony attended only by family. The Duke of Thornfield published a complete accounting of his family's historical deception, returning certain disputed lands to their rightful owners and using his position in the House of Lords to advocate for historical preservation. As for Catherine, she continued her work, now with the full support of a husband who valued truth above appearances. Together, they transformed Thornfield House into a centre for historical research and preservation, opening its doors to scholars regardless of background or means. On autumn evenings, they could often be found walking the grounds together, hand in hand among the falling leaves, proving that sometimes, even in a world bound by duty and convention, love finds a way to rewrite history.